Okay, thank you. All right, this is Senate Institutions. It is Friday, April 4th. And what we're doing today is first, we're going to get an introduction from Chair Alice Emmons from the House Committee on Corrections and Institutions, who has brought some members with her. And then we're going to look at section 9. I guess the best ones, right?
We have 11 members. We're a tight group.
And then we're going to look at section 9 of the governor's recommended budget. And that is all that's on our agenda today. And what we'll do first is introduce ourselves. I'm Wendy Harrison. I'm the chair of this committee, and I represent the residents of the Wyndham District.
Senator Russ Ingles, good to see, oh, yeah, good to see everyone. Wow.
Rough room. Senator Joe Major, Windsor.
And I'm Rob Plunkett, Bennington.
And then Alice, do you want to go first?
Sure.
And you can introduce your folks. And Scott.
Scott Moore, Legislative Finance Manager, Transmission.
Great, thank you.
Representative Greer. Representative Sweeney from Shelburne and St. George.
Representative Winter from Ludlow, Shrewsbury, Mount Hopping.
Representative Mary Morrissey from Benton.
Nice. Thank you all for being.
When?
And
BG, did you just chop liver?
Cole Barney, yeah.
thank you.
Cole was in the corner there.
Who are you?
I still like.
Oh, okay. Good.
You still, Joe.
Yes, still.
Joe.
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to the spreadsheet.
Yeah, go to the spreadsheet. That's how I work for,
Yeah.
it's better going through the spreadsheet, and then we do have language on the back of the bill. But for the record, my name is Alice Simmons, Chair, Representative Alice Simmons, Chair of the House Corrections and Institutions Committee. So I'm sure, Scott, you went over the structure of the spreadsheet with them
Yes.
the other day, so I can just go through some of the changes.
Yes, to be
For
perfect.
that. The first one is a big change in terms, not money wise, but we moved $7.1 million over to bonded dollars. The governor had proposed $8 million in cash. The reason we did that, there was a lot of concern in my committee about tracking. These are small projects. Some of them go as high as 250,000, but a lot of them are smaller projects. We felt it was easier to keep track of it. If it was bonded dollars. What we're starting to find, and I don't know if you're gonna start to find this as you start to go through your process for the capital budget. For the past couple of years, we have had projects that are funded totally by bonded dollars or totally by cash. And there are some projects that are funded by both. And it's really beginning to be difficult to track it. And that fed into why we moved this money, the bulk of it, over to bonded, because of previously for major maintenance of BGS, it's always been bonded dollars. You didn't do any cash. So as we go through the bill, and you're going to see that there's a lot of movement of previous bonded dollars. There's some projects, because in testimony with BGS or some other entities, the projects aren't going out as they had anticipated, or the scopes have changed. So we've gone back. If you don't have last biennium's spreadsheet when you're working, I would really recommend you've got to have this with you at some point. So
May I ask you a question? Is the tracking a problem in when you do the not the clawback, the reallocation? Because we don't do that, so we wouldn't know about that. Is that where it's an issue, or is it somewhere else?
it's when we're taking testimony on projects that we know that, a few years ago, we have, like, an example, and we'll get to it, it's down in corrections. An example is booking in St. Albans at the St. Albans Correctional Facility. And we put, no, I don't find it, this is where it gets really difficult. We put in 2.5, 2.6 million last year to have booking expansion, planning and design documents and possible construction of the St. Albans facility for their booking expansion. Well, in this year's capital bill, if we jump down to DOC, I think it's in DOC, St. Albans, on line 25, it's roof replacement.
Mm-hmm.
So the question and testimony is, well, how far along are you in the booking, which they're not far along at all? And how is the roof? Are you doing any roofing over the booking? Because if you're going to be expanding that area, how is it intertwined? They said, well, it might be and it might not be. So that's where you see these interconnections. And then we have language that they can move money between the two projects so that it gives BGS flexibility. So that's not connected to the reallocations. It's connected to the
Okay.
testimony that we receive. So there's little bits and pieces of this as we'll go through that comes out of the testimony that we received, and then knowing what we've done in the past and saying, wait a minute here, and this is an example.
Okay, so if that was in cash, it wouldn't be,
Then you'd have to go to your cash part of your spreadsheet, which in last year's spreadsheet was a separate section 18.
okay,
So you're working between a lot of different places on the old spreadsheet.
okay,
Uh,
okay. So other than that, is it objectionable to the committee to have this in bonded versus cash? Or cash?
Well, it makes it more difficult to track, because some of the projects may have a little bit of bonded dollars, and they may have some cash as well. And
Right.
that's where it gets really difficult to track. So what we have done for language in the back, I'm going to show you this.
And then I did see, sorry, the,
Well, it's hard to figure out the language. In the past, when we had the capital budget presented to us in the book,
okay,
we would have a chart like this for each project, basically, that were under BGS.
okay,
And it would have how much money had been approved in the past, probably some of those years, and what it was used for. Planning, site acquisition, construction, fit out. And then it would have the current governor's recommended amount for the current 2-year budget. You can also add a line for cash.
mm-hmm,
We don't have that anymore. So it's been really, really difficult to follow. So we've said in language in the back of the bill, we want this back.
good,
Yes.
good,
We want, I can pass this around.
yeah,
So folks can see it, but that came out of an old budget a few years ago. And I pulled that out the other day as an example.
okay,
Because unless you've been on a committee for a length of time and you know how to work with the spreadsheets, you have some memory of some of the projects, you're not gonna know.
right,
So eventually there'll be enough turnover in the committees. If you don't have a chart like that, you're not gonna see the whole picture of the projects.
right.
And that's what
right.
we were encountering. There's a whole picture here to some of these projects. And you really had to know some background in order how to go forward.
Right, because they are capital projects that exist over multiple years, so we should see multiple years.
Right.
That sounds very logical, and thank you for doing that.
So to get back to where I was here for where,
Okay, Senator Ingles has a question or a comment.
I get all that, if you take that, Madam Chair, as how you've explained it, but the bottom line is, at the end of the day, we still lost $7,338,624 out of the capital, budget. And it's, no secret as far as where that's gone, but we don't have that monies anymore. We'll try to claw some of that back, which is a hard process to do once it's spent, but by doing what you've done, we've lost $7.3 million.
so the House has one version, the Senate will have another,
Okay.
and then we negotiate. So
I'm sorry.
that's where it
Yeah,
was.
yeah, yeah,
And you're
Yeah.
going to deal with appropriations on both sides.
Yeah.
That's the way it works.
okay,
And so. Let's see if I have a line here. So the other big change was, now this is a good example of the 3-acre parcel. in testimony with BGS and looking at the time frame in terms of the permitting and the projects that are needed, as well as past dollars that were expended. We had $3 million in FY 24 and 25, and then there was another $3 million that was being requested for these two fiscal years coming up. In looking at where they had permits and where they were anticipating doing the projects and the time frame for it, they weren't going to get all of this money out the door in a time, because they still hadn't spent very much of the $3 million that they already had in place.
Okay.
And they also had some ARPA dollars that had come in, and they used the ARPA dollars for design and permitting for the sites. So, they still had quite a bit of the bonded money. So we decided on FY 27 to cut them back by 400,000. And we know we have BAA come next January that we can revisit this.
Okay, and this is on line 4, right? Is
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Any questions? It's like not, okay.
The repointing on the State House, that was just kind of rounding it up, rounding it down. The 723, we just went to 500. The power upgrade, there was a project that had a balance of some cash that, was not needed, so we moved that over to bonded dollars to track, and to complete that project. We really want the project to be completed. That's up at the Middlesex, it's with the
Okay.
archives, and Princeton Postal, that's with BGS.
All right, and we did understand that that was really necessary, and I had it
That's
marked to ask you why, so that's great.
Yeah, that's why we added, it, because we really wanted to get that done.
Thank you.
We also know the Waterbury State Office Complex with the roof replacement, that's gonna be an ongoing project. That's gonna be just about every year. This is not a one-time shot.
Yeah.
It's gonna be something that's gonna be there for a long time.
How old is that complex?
Well, it depends what part you're
Yeah,
talking about.
some of it's new, I thought.
Oh, it's from Irene. The bulk of it is
Okay.
from Irene. That was built through 2013, 14, and 15. And then the historic core, which is where your Secretary of the Agency of Human Services offices. That was built late 1800s, early 1900s.
Okay.
For that. The majority of the building really is the newer part, but we did keep the historic core.
And is the roof for the,
Historic.
oh, historic forest, that's right there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
That, we were thinking of doing that when we rebuilt the complex after Irene, but then it sort of got cut out because it was so expensive. So that's gonna be an ongoing.
Okay.
Get my head around the next one, which. This is where it gets a little complicated. VOC, HVAC system. I haven't looked at this in a week, so bear with me. This is something that we've been in the works for a few years here. To date, we have put in 5.9 million for work being done at our correctional facilities. There's really 4 facilities that need air conditioning. Our Chittenden facility for the women already have air conditioning. Marble Valley, which is Rutland, already has air conditioning. So we have Springfield, Newport, St. Johnsbury, which also would include the work camp, as well as St. Albans. So we've been working with BGS as well as DFC probably the past 4 years to really bring air conditioning into those facilities. In the interim, we've also asked BGS if there is any opportunity to also put in some air cooling in some of the common areas, and maybe the staff would be going in, or a common area, maybe the residents who live there could go in temporarily. So that's also some work that's being done in conjunction. But our goal is to put in a full HVAC system, air conditioning, first in the Springfield facility, and then in Newport. And then the other one was the work camp in St. Jay. And there was concern from the committee that there is a initiative in the governor's general fund budget to really do some changeover at the St. Johnsbury facility, which might also include the work camp building for treatment facility for folks who are incarcerated. It would be substance use disorder treatment. There's money in the general fund budget to start doing this, trying to put together a plan to do this. And in testimony, we asked while we were looking at that governor's proposal for a treatment facility, would there need to be some renovations? And there might be. We're not sure yet. So we'll know more next year when the plan comes back to us. So we said the priority is really Springfield and Newport. Let's hold a little bit off on St. James so we really know what treatment program is going to be there. And if we have to do any renovations to the building before we go in there and put in an HVAC system and then have to tear it out. And then St. Albans, that's a bigger project. And we have to get through reconfiguring the booking area and dealing with the roof.
Mhm.
So that's why we ended up cutting this back a little bit. And as I said, in 23 and 24, up to that point, we had about 5.1 million. What is left of that is about 4.7. And what is happening, BTS is going out looking for a construction manager so that they have a better idea what the cost of these projects for Springfield and Newport and possibly St. Jay will be. So that is not in place yet. That might be in place come at the end of the legislative session so that they have a better idea. Can they do two facilities at the same time, or they only do one at a time and one at the next time? To do the Springfield facility, it's a good 3 million. To do Newport, it could be 4. We're not sure what the cost is going to be now that there's tariffs in place in terms of aluminum and steel. And also there is a real lag time in terms of the air handlers. So the construction can't even begin until the summer of 26. Because it won't even be, it's about a year to a year and a half lag time to get the air handlers supply chain. So instead of tying up all this money, we don't want to stop the project. We're very, very clear on this. So they already have 4.7. That can get you Springfield. And if that's why we gave a little haircut in FY26 of $1 million, we cut it to 4 million, which would then allow them to do Newport if it all came about really quick.
All right.
But again, they're not going to get the air handlers for about a year and a half. So they won't be able to start construction.
I'm sorry, did you say Newport? You're gonna do Newport? I thought you were gonna do.
Springfield first.
Springfield, okay, that's what.
So they got enough money
Yeah.
in hand right now. They have
Do Spring-
4.7.
Do Springfield,
And also maybe work in some other of the smaller areas.
yeah.
Maybe at St. Albans for that. And maybe Newport, maybe St. Jay. It depends when they get the project manager on board. Really, the construction manager, not project manager, it's construction manager. So that's why we cut the back a little bit. Because we don't want to stop this project.
Yeah, it's so
It's really
necessary.
important, yeah. But we also don't want the money hanging out there.
Mm-hmm.
The roof replacement, again, we provided some flexibility there with the booking area. So that's why we felt we could come back. 400,000. Okay. So this is, let me see here.
The sprinkler.
Yeah, we cut that back because in testimony, it was sort of like, how soon are you really gonna be doing this? It's $1 million in FY27. How soon are we really going to be putting, a shovel in the ground? They're working right now on replacing the boiler at Newport. And that's not going as quickly as they had hoped as well. So the priority right now sort of has been more the boiler. And this is for FY 27. So we were saying we can cut this back a little bit and revisit it next year, see where they are on the boiler. And then they can start tackling the sprinkler system next year, because this is FY 27.
With the sprinkler system, obviously it's passing. Safety inspection.
I think they're gonna have to do it. They're gonna have to do
And
it.
it's a replacement.
Yeah,
Right.
but they had
It's an
that,
upgrade, so, yeah.
but they had that scheduled.
Well, I guess that's the concern that I would have is if there's a safety concern.
They didn't indicate it was a safety
Okay.
concern.
Well, we can ask them.
Yeah,
Well,
you should ask them, but
Yeah.
they're also looking at the boiler. To replace, that's money from last year.
Okay. Great.
Okay, so the big change is in the next one. The 3Ds is what we call them.
Oh, yeah.
There was a lot of concern on these projects using bonded dollars. In that these dollars are going to private developers. And we know it's for infrastructure upgrades. It could be a variety of infrastructure upgrades. The committee had a lot of concern that it was bonded dollars. So in the conversations that we've had and the testimony, we said part of the concern for bonded dollars is bonded dollars going to private entities for infrastructure upgrades that, you know, you start doing it for one or two private developers, you're gonna have a line out for full pressure on the capital. And we just don't have that capacity to do that. The other piece too that was feeding into this is a piece of legislation that's working through both bodies. It was the governor's initiative, and it was his recommendation that we develop an infrastructure fund to help projects such as these, to really help with the infrastructure from the main infrastructure, water and sewer, whatever it might be, to that last hookup to a housing development or a development area is that last hookup. That bill is working through the legislature. That funding is working through the legislature. And we're saying, why do we want to open up a capital bill right now when there is a proposal out there for an infrastructure fund, revolving fund, to do the same thing that what these dollars are being asked to do? Granted, those dollars aren't going to be available for a couple of years. So we decided to move this to cash. So what we ended up doing was we took 2 million of the cash and we said to appropriations committee, we're moving these two projects over. We did cut it by $1 million because some projects are ahead of other projects. Go ahead. We cut it down to 2 million and we gave appropriations the 2 million in cash, but it's an item in their budget. We also talked about putting some parameters around in terms of, we kind of were thinking maybe a grant program in the interim, putting some parameters around, but when we receive testimony from the Department of Housing and Community Affairs, I was going to say Housing and Conservation, but this is the department within ACCD. They didn't want a grant program. They felt it would be too restrictive. They felt it would be too much, too ongoing. It'd be an ongoing grant program. So we deleted that line. We kept it just a straight. These are the projects. The funds are going to ACCD, Agency of Commerce and Community Development. And we made the appropriations whole in that we gave them the $2 million from our budget in cash for that.
So it doesn't, so I'm looking at section 4 in the text, in the bill.
There is no,
So it doesn't mention this?
No.
But where is the money?
in appropriations bill, in general fund, it's in the big budget.
Okay, and it's 2 million and it's not in this at all.
It is in the state budget. under ACCG.
Okay, and presumably, and we heard testimony from ACCD about their support for these programs, and my understanding was, that the infrastructure would be publicly owned, but you know,
But the concern in our committee was really opening up the capital bills for private
yeah, I understand that.
private use, so you move that over to appropriations, and then that can dovetail into the infrastructure fund that is being developed.
Right, and then ACCD knows what they know what they want, yeah, so.
Yeah.
Did the projects themselves look appealing, or did you not get?
There was some concerns about some of them,
Oh,
the committee members, there was some concern, and there was a lot of concern about capital dollars going into private.
oh, I definitely understand that, I was just curious how people thought about the projects just on their own. But that's right,
Depended on the project,
okay,
okay.
okay.
The roadside historic markers, we've always funded those. It was not included in the governor's recommend.
Yeah, I
And
thought we funded that.
we've always
Yeah,
funded that,
okay.
and they do have some castings that are out there that, historic preservation is gonna have to pay for out of their own budget, so we put that back in.
Okay,
Bennington Monument, this is a case of some reallocation of dollars. And, last year's capital bill, I think it was last year, I think it was the year before, I don't remember. So we had $500,000 that we put in for fencing around the monument for safety issues for the public. And there's about 419,000 that was left out of that. So in testimony, we reallocated that 419 and put it towards the phase where historic preservation will go out with an RFP to really figure out how we can take a next step in terms of drying out the monument. What is really going to be needed to do that, but they needed money to go out with an RFP. On top of that, the windstorm that we had 3 weeks ago really hit Bennington hard with wind gusts up to 60 miles an hour, and there was some damage done to the fence. So that's gonna have to be repaired, and we weren't sure, BGS as well as historic preservation, they weren't sure if the insurance from the company is gonna cover that, or if historic preservation had to cover. So that's why we bumped up to 525,000, because it would be about $500,000 or so to go out for an RFP for the next phase. And we wanted to ensure that there was enough money there in case they needed the money to repair the roof from the wind damage.
You work on that. The fence. That's what you want to.
So 419,000 of that has been reallocated.
yeah, and I visited the monument again, I've been there before, but this was a much better tour. And I just saw the water just seeping out inside. At that time it was frozen, but it was really obvious, just the dark patches,
Gotta do something.
wrong kind of stone. Next time you guys build.
Yeah. Bill,
It's all your fault.
No.
Next time you build 100 floors.
Around when they build to.
The next section, building community grants, these are small grants that go back to our municipalities and nonprofits. There's been a lot of support for those. What the governor recommended were different amounts for some of them. Traditionally, we have always funded each grant program the same amount. So we bumped all of them up that were not up to 300,000. We also combined the human services and education one. That one had always been combined up until a few years ago. When it was recommended, we split them for a little bit to see if there's more applications coming in on the human services side than the education side. And we did that. There seems to be a little bit more coming in on human services than the education side. But not really substantial, real difference. So we decided in testimony we received from the commissioner of BGS, she was saying it would be nice to put them back together, because if you still had some money left over from the human services grant side, you can apply it to some on the education side where when they were split, they couldn't do that.
Okay,
So that's why we've put it back together. We also have language at the back of the bill and or in the bill, end of this section, that our intent is that the money would be evenly divided between as much as possible between the human services grants and the education. So that's why they're put back.
good. And I'm really glad you put the money back in because those just historically, 300,000 for our whole state, which we have so much historic sites to prevent or to protect rather. But they do good work with this. I mean, they
These are
really
one-
get
yeah.
the state's money's worth.
Yeah, and they're 1-to-1 match, and your grants are usually capped around 25,000.
Yeah, so a lot of different entities use them. They're really good.
And the other thing too, when we developed these grant programs, we really wanted to make sure that the grant application was simple. It could be a one-page application so that the nonprofits wouldn't have to hire a grant writer and that whole complexity. Keep it simple, stupid.
And that works.
Keep it simple.
Yep.
And
I
And
did
it
one
works.
years ago. Can I ask a question? Last year, and certainly what you may, your memory might be better than mine, but we had, folks came in from one of the old cemeteries. And it turns out the stones, I just learned today, have been falling out as they said they were going to fall out. Because we have a lot of old cemeteries.
So, colleges.
Yeah. So do you remember that group? Well, we're
that
gonna
would be
have
out
them
of
in.
Rutland. Is that out of
Yeah.
Rutland?
It's a Wallingford.
Cut south of.
No, it's
Cutter, yeah,
Cuttingsville.
Cuttingsville.
Yeah,
That's
and it's a really
Yeah. Would
amazing
they qualify
building.
for historic preservation?
I don't know. Last year, they have the house that's historic and then across the street, there's a cemetery.
Cuttingsville.
Yes, Cuttingsville.
Yeah, and the retaining wall is failing. Is the problem. And, I don't know, maybe they would, but I'm just letting you know that we're gonna be talking about
I
that.
mean, he
Well,
needs
you need to work with
$100,000.
You need to work within whatever for grant program
Yeah.
in that, because we work away from individual court projects.
Yeah, no, I wasn't gonna do court, but I just.
Because that's why the grant programs are here.
Yeah.
Because in the past, we had a whole line of people out the door with their little projects. It could be a bell, it could be a skateboarding park, it could be bleachers. It could be, who knows what, a little rec program where they needed a building.
And I think this would,
And that's why we developed these
Yeah.
grant programs, because what was happening was who got the money was dependent in terms of who was sitting at the head of the table and what party was in control.
Hmm.
That's what was happening, and we would be spending our whole time arguing over 25,000 for this or 15,000 for that. And back in around 2005, 2006, is when we developed this building community grants program to take the politics out of it and have a fair review of the projects, keep the grant applications simple, and it's targeted to municipalities and nonprofits. Because that's who was coming to.
yeah, no, that's great. And I think that they would be eligible for these grants. I don't remember.
Cultural
Conversation,
facility.
but they should be eligible.
Might be for cultural facilities.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. I just want you to know that's happening again. Okay,
Section 6, which is the vets home, we did a lot of moving around on this one. We had quite a bit of testimony from the vets home because it was a work in progress for them in terms of what the projects are really gonna cost and the time frame. So the air handlers, they need to phase out the R22, which is the refrigerants, but also the air handlers are old. They can't find any replacement parts for them. They need to be replaced. In testimony, it wasn't gonna be as expensive as they had thought. As well as expansion of the laundry facility. I don't know if you've spoken to them or not. But they right now have the laundry, washer and dryer up on a second floor, which is really not a good place for it. They want to build like a room on the first floor. They have to replace their washer and dryers. They didn't know what size washers. They weren't sure about that and cost and all of that. So when they came back to us as we were doing markup, that price tag really did drop quite a bit in terms of what they were looking at, but they still weren't quite sure. So we've allowed some language to move money between those two projects, the air handlers and the laundry facility, in case one comes in a little higher than another. Then in conversation with them, we asked how in last year's capital bill, in the cash, we put in money, 1.5 million for FY 25 for them for renovations, the design work for B and C wings. So in testimony, we asked, how's it going along? And they said, well, we haven't done anything because the priority right now is A wing. In that we really need to deal with that wing first. We need to really tear it down and rebuild it. So we moved the money, cash, from B and C wing that we put in for FY 25. We moved that, reallocated it, went through reallocations, and allocated it for them for A wing to start design documents and possible construction. So that's why that shows up.
So I guess my question would be, if they've done that, so basically they moved the money to the other wing.
We did.
Oh, okay.
They did. We did.
Right.
It's here in the bill.
All right. So
Because they're not going forward with B and C.
they're not. That's just. In what condition is that? Yeah.
Not as bad as A. A wing is worse.
Are there still people in B and C?
I think so, yes. I don't know if there is an A wing. Mary, did you know?
They've been trying to get some out
Of the A wing?
of that A wing, but B and C, I think they are still to capacity.
So that was a higher priority that came up for them.
Yeah,
Changed over the years. So that's some of the work that we did. It was like, where are you with current project? And we found in some cases that things weren't going smoothly. UVM, we cut that down to the same amount as state colleges for their major maintenance, 1.5 million. That's always been tradition. We keep that the same for both. In state colleges, there's also a request for Johnson, their campus and central heating. I don't know if you've heard from state colleges.
we have, yes.
So it's an old heating system, needs to be replaced. We've also added language in the bill that they should reach out to Efficiency Vermont to see if they could do it a little differently or maybe more cost effective.
Yes, that was a good idea, because it's oil.
It's number 4 oil going to
Yeah.
number 2.
Yeah.
Natural resources, we kept the same governance recommend. Clean water section was the same governors recommend. Military was the same governors recommend. And we also did the same governors recommend for both the Big E as well as our Ag, A&R, and environmental lab. I don't know if you've heard testimony from BGS on this or not. We put in money last year. What was last year? Now I gotta find it. I think it was cash. Wasn't it cash for last year? We put it on those Scott's with them. So that was something else.
Here, it's in section 12.
It's in section 12. Yes, we put in 1.5 million last year. And, So this is sort of in addition to that. And in testimony, what it is, last year, BGS was gonna build a separate building with a summer boiler. That was the
Yeah.
plan. Now they've changed where we're going to have two boilers, two summer boilers that will be positioned and built within BTC's boiler room. Be on their property, within their facility. We will also be replacing 3 burners in their old boilers, BTC's old boilers. Because their boilers are really old. They're gonna need replacement down the road, but in the meantime, the thinking is if we could replace the burners, it will extend the life of those boilers. So that's all included in the 1.5 from last year and the 3.5 here.
So those are together, I mean,
Yeah,
they're
those are together.
cumulative.
And we've also added language that BTC and the state needs to update their MOU in terms of maintenance of the boiler and the burner and any charges that go back and forth for that. Here is an MOU right now, and we need that updated. So we put in language.
Right.
I think I'm missing anything on that one. The Rutland Field Station. We already have the land for this. It's in Clarendon. It's like, let's get it going if we can, and that's why we split it up 2 and 2. Instead of waiting for 4 million at price 27, we said, let's get it done.
And is that a new building? We haven't heard.
It's been in the works for a while.
Mhm.
We have the land.
But it's a new build.
Gonna be a new bill. And then Shaftesbury, this one may be a little controversial. There's a little state police barracks on Route 7 in Shaftesbury. And probably 15 years ago, 10, 15 years ago, there was discussion at that time. That building is leased. The lease is coming up, I think, in a couple of years. And there was talk, it must be a good 10 or 15 years ago, closing, moving the state police barracks. There was quite a bit of pushback from the community. And it was put on hold. So now they're opened up that again. I don't know what's gonna happen. The community has changed. That's not as much of an issue. I think we also have to keep in mind that our state police mode of working now is not so much to go into the headquarters and use the headquarters as their base. They're working out their vehicles now. So everything is on computer. It's all electronic. So the barracks are not used quite as much as they have been. So I don't know if that will change the thinking down around Shaftesbury or not. But that 150 is for FY27.
So Allison, and just because I'm not familiar, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I apologize. It is in a situation where you said the community did not want this to go away. What about rank and file that are working out of there? Can they, because if they say they can still maintain their force level,
Mhm.
then I think the community would be on for that. I guess.
I don't know. It's up to
Okay.
the community because they don't have a police force. Shaftesbury doesn't have a local police force. They depend on the state police. And I think part of the concern is if they don't have the building there, that the officers are going to be way off in the
Gotcha.
hinterlands. And then when someone in Shaftesbury needs something, they're not going to have it there. And they provide, the state police does provide coverage for the town of Shaftesbury. So I don't know that, Department of Public Safety wants to revisit this, and it's in FY27, so it does give time for the community to have some conversations and to reach out to the Department of Public Safety and state police and have those local conversations.
Okay.
Now's the time to really do that.
Okay. And is that their plan? To have those conversations?
I don't know if that's their plan,
Yeah.
just suggesting.
Oh, you, okay.
I have spoken to the member from Shakespeare.
Yes.
I've
spoken to him as well.
Oh, okay, great.
And said this is the time to do it.
Okay, good.
Look at you.
So,
Getting all kinds of stuff done.
Wheeling
Okay.
and dealing.
We don't have that many people, so we have to do multiple
I didn't
things.
know you got me introduce a checkbook out of the.
I'm making fools here.
for your basis. Judiciary. So we have 3 county courthouses that need power backup generators. We have Woodstock, we have Essex. And then we have Memorial that came in towards the end. It was a recommend from the court administrator, from the judiciary. They all need backup, power backup. If power goes down, they cannot function. County courthouses are owned by the county under the county budget that is developed by side judges. So in these 3 situations, it's like, is the county budget paying for any of this? And most of the answers were no. Particularly the Essex County one was no. There is a process. If county courthouses, side judges are to submit, they need, building improvements for projects. They are to submit the request to the court administrator. And then the court administrator, within their world, will then determine whether or not to recommend capital dollars for any of those projects. For that. We also have state-owned courthouses, which you will see for the White River courthouse. We have put in to date a little bit more than $6 million for renovations to that courthouse. That's a state-owned building. Woodstock, Essex, and Memorial are not state-owned. Part of the Memorial is, but the other 2 are not state-owned.
Then Woodstock go away once, White River is.
No. Woodstock is there.
Okay.
Criminal court occurs in your state-owned district courts. I think it goes that way, yeah.
Yeah.
Civil proceedings go into your county.
Yeah.
I think that's how it goes. But,
I don't know. It's interesting. I'm glad there's a.
but,
You would know.
am I,
Weigh in on this?
am I off base on that?
No, it's what happens in Bennington, although we do have civil court come to the state building for trials generally.
Right. So the operation, this is what is, and my committee may have some time to spend some time a little bit on this. The operation of the judiciary between criminal and civil has been unified. Before they were really separate, but now they're unified. When that was all done in terms of the operation of the courts, what was not discussed was who owns the buildings, where the state functions occur. So now state functioning is occurring in our county courthouses. So there could be an argument made by the county that, hey, the state needs to pony up here and help with these buildings because you've now got state functions happening in them.
Because criminal court is state functions. I think civil. have some.
So now they're all state functions. They
Okay.
used to be, but they all
I
are
see,
now.
okay.
So, so the White River Courthouse, that is a state-owned building that's going through a tremendous amount of renovations. Entryways, security, HVAC systems, it's really being rebuilt. Also, there is property that's being leased across the street from them where the court staff is housed temporarily. Once they hope to have the courthouse done hopefully by this fall, it's the hope. So once the court staff moves back into the new courthouse, the Windsor County State's Attorney, which is in lease space in downtown White River, will be moving into the office space across from it. So that was all negotiated and worked through last year.
Yeah, I remember that,
We
and
did.
everybody was pretty happy with that.
Yeah.
And
We
then-
went through that.
The Berry courthouse
That was last year.
did it end up well?
We're still trying to figure out, there's two courthouses out there. We're really trying to figure out where we go. The Berry one, we're trying to figure out if we keep it downtown, how can we expand it? It's really landlocked in some way. And it's really working with the municipality, and we're really trying to figure out, do you end up buying land somewhere and moving it out from downtown? Those conversations are still going on. Okay. Newport is still a big issue, and then we can't find land, and I believe we pulled some money. Didn't we pull some, we pulled,
You know, I know a
reallocated.
real estate agent
We
that,
actually have a bigger than that, and we talked to the governor just the other day about it, and we actually have 4 people in there. Including Judge Zone and including Judge Tebow, and we're working on plans to keep the courthouse where it's at. And so as far as, I know that BGS is thinking that we're still looking for land, but we're really not interested as in the community as far as moving where the courthouse is. So I think that there's no reason to have dollars sitting there when we have other plans and what people are talking about.
So we did reallocate, I believe, some dollars for that. I'm trying to find it here. I
Just
see,
a minute away.
I see the boiler, we reallocated $1 million from the boiler.
goes out, that was for the bonded, the
Yeah.
governor rather.
Well, we did that, everything you see that's highlighted. I thought we did
I
something.
don't,
for the
I was
courthouse.
looking at Newport, it doesn't look like
Oh, okay, no.
Well, it-
We took,
it's,
okay, that's
it
right,
took it.
oh, this is the one that we're looking at
that's right. So we did take,
now.
well, no,
Bang,
that-
bang.
in Newport, there was on line 118, $1 million in FY 27.
Yeah,
We zeroed that out
okay.
because they already had previous money. I forgot how much, 3 million, I think, 3.5 million they already had, because the thinking was it could possibly purchase land. And some parts of the current courthouse, Newport Courthouse, I believe it's P&P and the sheriffs have moved out. So there is more space in there, maybe you combine them, I mean, we've talked all the different options on what to do.
So is back to Berry, is the Berry money still allocated to that, and how do we find that out?
You have to talk to BGS.
So there's nothing,
We've talked to
there's
BGS.
not a report.
No, we've talked to BGS. That would be. Where would we put that? That might have been. That might have been, we did that last year. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I thought
it's
it
in
was something
cash.
was going to happen.
It's in cash. There's 1.6 million in cash. That we put in last year's capital bill on line 194. It was for design and land acquisition,
194.
line 194.
Yeah.
So we're still on a holding pattern trying to figure out what to do now.
Okay.
Okay,
So that money is still in an account somewhere.
yeah, BGS,
Okay.
we need to talk to BGS.
Okay.
About that. So. And then dry hydrants, that's ongoing, we've done that every year. And then the Historical Society, they had quite a bit of flood damage, water infiltration in that. So we agreed to the 700,000. So then all these highlights on the reallocation, our committee does put together, what I call the repro committee, that's 3 committee members. And after we get the governor's recommend, because the governor's recommend reallocations is a point in time. So my three members do work. They send a letter out, all the departments and agencies. What it is any money that is 2 years old or more may be reallocated. You have to justify if it's not encumbered, why it's not encumbered and why you're gonna need it. So it's a may. If anything is more than 5 years old, we reallocate. That's by statute.
Okay.
So the three members of the committee really worked with those entities that had money that was older than 5 years old. And some of them really did make a case that we need to keep these dollars because of X, Y, and Z. We were waiting to match as federal dollars, we're waiting for some federal dollars. Project isn't quite ready for being covered yet, but we're anticipating that in the next few months. So we have language in the back of the bill, the reallocations that you'll see some notwithstanding. And it's for those 5-year projects, those projects older than 5 years that the repo committee recommended we keep the money there and we don't reallocate.
Okay.
So everything that you see in yellow here is reallocations. From the work that folks have done. I'm gonna highlight a couple of things. The Newport boiler, lines 143. They're not moving as quickly as they had planned. So we reallocated $1 million of bonded dollars that they had. On line 144, we had in last year's capital bill, this came and was the request of some members of my committee last year. For the current Chittenden facility, when that gets empty, when the new women's facility is built, there was thought of possibly converting that into a reentry facility, if possible, for men. And looking at the timeline now for when we're actually going to be able to meet the women, we did a study like this now, it'd be so outdated by the time the reality hits. So we said, let's reallocate that 1.5. And then if you go down to lines 153, you'll see the Bennington Monument reallocation of the 419. And then if you go to line 157, you'll see the reallocation of cash, the 1.5 for B and C wing. That goes now to A wing of the vets home. And lines 158, this is money we put in last year. I think it was last year. It was 200,000 in cash to the stack area over in the pavilion. And it's where the Department of Libraries used to be. We call it the stack area because they had all these metal stacks for the Department of State Libraries. That's been empty for a while. The thinking was that could be converted so that the Supreme Court could use it. And asking testimony of DGS, where's this 200,000? They said, well, the plans have changed. The Supreme Court isn't quite sure if we're going to need to use the space. We said, do you need the money? They said no.
Okay.
So we
So what about there's the renovations for the that big meeting room that they have there? I mean, did they use the money for that? I mean, it's not on the same level as the stack, but it's underneath.
No, they took that in, right, that could have come out of maintenance or contingency. That was nothing that,
Because it turned out nice,
yeah, that was to replace the auditorium.
right?
So what we ended up doing was, in terms of cash, I'm gonna explain it just a little bit different. 2 million went to approves. And then last year there was we ended up, because we were asked to help out appropriations. So we ended up with about 5.3 million in helping our colleagues in appropriations committee with the state budget. 1 million of that 5.3 is money that was in another cash fund sub-account that was freed up last year. It was 1 million that had not been used. It was for state colleges. And it was for Vail and Green Vale and Green, and they are not doing Green, right? They're doing Vale, but they're not doing Green. And that came clear last year. So we freed up that 1 million last year to be used, that appropriations to be used. They didn't use it. What the administration did is they pulled that 1 million to put to our capital bill. And we said, wait a minute, we already gave you this last year appropriations. So that's 1 million we gave back to appropriations
This year.
this year. So we're down to 4.3 million, and we found that just by moving money around and some reallocations. And that's how we came up with 4.3 million to help them out for that. So we end up with a total bonded amount of 111.965 for 3 years. Because we did have a bond premium of 6.8 million. And a total capital budget of 123.296 million for 2 years. The first year we're at 61.6. The second year we're at 50.3 for bonded dollars. And we don't have cash in FY27 because we do a 2-year budget. Appropriation only does a 1-year budget, so we don't know what will be available next year. And also, I'll send you back to section 10. If you look at FY26, you've got some projects there. If you look at FY27, there's no projects, only a lump sum of 10 million. When we agreed to include projects in our capital budget to meet our TMDL, those projects are recommended by the Clean Water Fund Board. They only work 1 year at a time. So come next December, they'll have recommendations for the FY27. But we made an agreement way back that we would put aside 10 million per year and change.
Okay. And that's been years, right?
And that's why there's 10 million on.
Didn't we had some extra money for water and sewer, but that was somewhere else.
That was ARPA. We've had money for ARPA, for municipal pollution grants. We've had money from IIJA for pollution grants, as well as our drinking water and clean water revolving loan funds to our state match for IIJA. So in this year's appropriations bill, there will be, and we also have a language in our bill as well, to free up 14.5 million that we've already put aside. And it was cash, already put aside to meet our match for the IIJA. We have a couple more years
Okay.
of federal dollars available, providing nothing happens. And that money is being freed up.
Okay, perfect. That's great. That's exactly what we're wondering about. Not Senator Ingalls was still, I'm sure would like to understand or talk about it maybe. So I think that's 202 and 203 where it's the 9.8 million and 4.5 million on last year's.
Where are you?
Or actually that's, well, the state match for
You're at last year.
Yes, yeah. It's 202 is 9.8 million
Yeah, but that's
on the
separate.
cash.
That's on top of what was we already had 9.8.
So it's another
Yeah,
9.8.
there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of money out
So it would be good to know where all that is.
Yeah, I think Jared has offered for you to come in, Jared Carpenter, who was in here.
Yeah.
He was gonna reach out to you. He was
Okay.
going to break that down and give you the history, not only of, he'd be able to go back and start a time and bring it right forward.
Good. I'd like all of us to know that. Okay. And to be able to
I'm
see
saying,
it
he's
too.
come and testify.
Okay, good.
So I don't know if you want to do any language. We do have some language here in the back.
If it's things that you think that we should know.
Yeah, there might be. Probably, yeah, my bearings.
Yeah, we did go through it.
Moving
quickly,
money.
I
There's
just-
a lot of it moving money.
Well, I guess maybe I just looked at it.
There's a lot, like on page 25. That's where we free up the 14, this is lines 11 through 19, that's where we free up in the big bill, that 14.5 million. To go to our IIJA match.
Okay, so I'm sorry, let me see this. Doesn't have the dollar.
Yes, it does,
We're at
line
the-
19.
My apologies, Madam Chair. They have the as introduced. I don't think they.
Oh, you don't have the new,
They might not have the latest version.
No, we have it as introduced.
Yeah.
that's our version.
Okay, but I do have a different draft. So I wanted to make sure that,
I have the final draft.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm looking at the wrong.
I think this might
I
be
know
the
we're
first
gonna
draft.
draft, because that's not what it is.
Okay. Well, it's,
We haven't amended.
say again, is it,
It's-
what
it's-
page?
It is, I had page 25,
Okay, I was on the wrong page, so maybe,
D as an authorization. Do you have that?
No.
yeah, at the bottom,
Line 11,
yeah.
and you go down to 18 and 19, you'll see 14.5 million on line 19.
That it was on my side.
Is it different?
The as introduced, different.
It's the,
Yeah.
it's the same.
I think it might just be the spacing. Yeah, because there's a title that
Right,
comes
okay.
in. when you-
So it is.
Oh, I see the 14.5, so it's on.
Yeah, it's on
line
section
4.
19. And you're dealing with section 19.
Yeah.
with Your authorizations. And you go down to little d
Yeah, and it's,
at the end of that paragraph.
yes, and so on this, on the introduce, it's on page 26, line 4. Because it says the amount of 14.5 million, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
And then if you go to the next section, E, what that is saying is that the Vets Home has authority to move money between the projects of the A wing, well, what was the A wing. And there's also money in FY 24 of bonded dollars that we put in 4.5 million for the emergency generator and boiler plant replacement. They don't know how far along they're gonna be able to move on that. So we've allowed language that they could move some of that 4.5 million if they needed to up to the B wing to help them go through. That's what that section says. Section 20 deals with what the governor wanted to do to clarify. This deals with the budget in terms of, this is gonna be the. This is, I thought this was a cash fund, but it is a cash fund, it's gotta be. Oh, this is when the budget is presented. And they wanted to clarify December 15th of each year is the third Tuesday of every annual session. That's when the governor's addresses is when the capital bill gets presented. It was really weird, December 15th, so we corrected that. Then on section 21, that is the language that's underlined that pertains to doing these charts.
yes, I like that language. That's
That's what
interesting, yeah, I put a couple check marks next to that. Thank you.
And then section 22, this is what the governor recommended. This pertains to the cash fund. And the way the cash fund was set up, in terms of the capital infrastructure sub-account, that pertains to capital projects. The structure of the cash fund was set up in appropriations committees. And basically the Senate Appropriation Committee set it up. There's two accounts to the cash fund. There's sub-account A that we call, which is your capital infrastructure sub-account, which deals with the projects of capital that are funded by cash. Then they also set up another sub-account that was for other construction projects and other infrastructure upgrades. That could be transportation projects. It's where we also parked our state match for the IIJA. So for the capital infrastructure, it says that for cash that is no more than 2 years old, can be reallocated. So we're just learning how to work with the cash fund. And a lot of those dollars, you know, we're bumping up to the 2 years. And the question is, who reallocates this? This appropriations reallocated, this institutions reallocated, do you work together? So at this point, we're kind of working together on this because we don't control cash. It's appropriations committees. We don't appropriate it. We don't appropriate the bonded dollars. It's appropriations that appropriates. We allocate, they appropriate. So we have recommended that you do a 3-year look there instead of a 2. Let's work through this few years and really start seeing how it plays out. And they really wanted to clarify, when does the clock start ticking on those 3 years? And we said the end of the legislative session, which is when you're adjourned. And that could be if you have a veto session and you come back in June, that would be in June. So that's clarifying.
And that's, we're in that time period now.
Yes, and it's, a lot of those dollars hadn't gone out the door.
And
Because
so,
they're part of another project. They're part of a project that could have bonded dollars. You know, so there's a lot of enmeshment that's going on, and we really have to start working through this over time to really see how it's going to shift.
okay,
Section 23 came in at a request of the town of Waterbury, and we worked with the town of Waterbury and BGS to really see if this could be possible. They went away, they went to the cafeteria, they worked out an agreement. This language is the result of this. Near the Waterbury complex and near Randall Street, there is a piece of property that's called the Randall Meadow. And the state owns it. It's on the west side of a parking lot for the Waterbury complex, and it's behind Randall Street. Every time there's a major event of flooding, that field fills up with silt. So it's going higher and higher, and the homes on Randall Street are getting flooded pretty periodically if there's any flooding event. That land is being leased to a farmer. The state owns the land. We lease it to a farmer, and the lease expires, I believe, in 27. And the town of Waterbury would like that property to be transferred at no cost to the town. And they plan on investing quite a bit of money to flood-proof that whole area. There's a lot of silt that needs to be taken out of there. And what the town is proposing is to pull out the silt, but also to contour that property so that Randall Street doesn't flood. But also our complex would be more protected.
that's great.
So
So,
BGS and Waterbury worked out the language that you see before you. And it would allow the state to transfer, it would be at no cost to the town. But there are some conditions. The parcel would have to be subdivided to reflect stormwater management needs of the complex with the satisfaction of the commissioner of BGS. Any permits required for transferring have to be obtained. And the commissioner of BGS and the town of Waterbury need to create a plan to align the transfer with the current lease parcel with the farmer. So that language was put in place and that agreed to by both parties.
yes,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So if I'm reading this correct, we're going to take care of the farm who currently,
That would have to be addressed, yes. Yeah,
how,
that's up to the commissioner and the town of Waterbury.
so they have to negotiate that with the farm.
Right, because right now it's the commissioner who has a lease, the farmer has a lease with BGS right now.
Do we know how long that lease is for?
It expires, I believe, in 27.
So,
And
I
the
guess
farmer
we-
is aware that this would
Okay.
happen.
I don't. He's had that land. It would just be just doing the right thing.
Right,
Right by them.
Right. there was concern on all parts for that.
Okay.
That's why that was put in there.
yeah, and there's plenty of time. I mean, we did some floodplain restoration in Brattleboro. It takes a long time
Okay.
to just get the permits done. And so the permit that's talked about on, and this one is line 6, where it says any permits required for transfer.
There may need to be some permits have a conversation with BGS.
Uh-huh,
And there may be some permits on the town level that may need to be brought in too. But
okay,
they're the ones that negotiated this line.
okay, but it's for permits for transfer rather than permits for developing the
Right,
land.
they're not gonna develop the land.
Okay,
The town's not gonna develop it. They're
well,
gonna,
develop this floodplain, I mean, it'll be,
they're gonna be moving out the silt
right,
and then reconfiguring it so that it protects the properties on Randall Street as well as the Concord.
right, and then I'm just calling that development because it is going to be a big project.
Right.
But it's great, that's terrific.
So, you know, you can have the commissioner in, have the town library in.
That's
They
great.
reach an agreement. We said she'll go work it out, see what she can come up with.
Great.
In section 24, this amends last year's capital bill. We put in place for the capital complex here. We have some buildings. We can't really move in repairing, moving mechanicals in some of our buildings in the capital complex that was flooded in 23 until we get approval from FEMA. There's also 4 or 5 buildings that are empty. And if you have time to take a tour, it's well worth it.
Love to.
Take a tour of the capital complex.
The committee likes tours.
Yeah, I know you do. But
I do, but
our
you've
committee
been
took
going so far.
Our committee took a tour this week and it's really informative to see how much damage was done by the flood in 23 and the mechanical equipment that's going to have to be moved. We're talking about a $250 million project at the minimum.
That still hasn't been done.
We're waiting for FEMA. We have to get
Okay.
approval from FEMA before we expend any dollars. Because if we expend dollars in renovating or tearing down the buildings, we could lose FEMA.
FEMA's already lined.
Well, we
Yeah.
hope the plug doesn't get pulled.
Yeah.
And it's a long process to go through FEMA. If you're interested, have Doug Farnham come in. We can talk to you at length. But we put in language in last year's capital bill. If anything happens where there needs to be a decision and an approval by the legislative body to move ahead with a certain part of that project. The only committee that can make any decision on behalf of the legislature when we're off session is joint fiscal committee for the emergency. So in last year's capital bill, we put in language that the joint fiscal committee, along with the 2 chairs of the institutions committee, could act on behalf of the legislature to make a decision on moving forward with the capital complex. That's still in place. We did add to that that the city of Montpelier, that the committee on the planning process for the capital complex would be involved. But the commissioner of BGS, when they give updates to that special committee, the joint fiscal committee for the 2 chairs, if there's any updates, would also provide updates to the city of Montpelier and the Montpelier Commission for Recovery and Resilience for any proposal or plans for the capital complex flood recovery. So we included Montpelier in that. So that's the big one.
So the question on that, there's the capital complex board or commission. There's a group of
Yeah, but that's not
individuals.
what this is about.
Yeah, I was just didn't know if you had talked about including them. Just
No,
in
this
the-
came from the representative from Montpelier, because these are the folks who are really working on this
Okay.
for that. And then, this is what I'm thinking, maybe it's, yeah, okay. Section 25 is the repeal of that study of the Chittenden facility, which converted to a reentry. And then section 26 is just to ensure that if there's federal monies that come back to help with the vet's home for the emergency generator as well as the boiler plant replacement, that those federal dollars would be returned to the capital bill. They're supposed to be, but we want to make sure.
Okay, and just one question, or just I want to say for the record on the repeal of the reuse of the Chittenden
Mhm.
Regional Correctional Facility, as you said previously, the intent is still to, try to find a way to do reentry for the men. This doesn't mean we don't want reentry for the men.
Right.
I just want that to be clear.
Right.
'Cause
We don't
people
wanna
might
stop
be
it.
listening. Yeah,
We'd love to do it as well. At the same time, we're doing women.
Yeah.
Money's the issue.
right,
Land is the issue.
right. But our intent and desire is to make it happen.
Yep.
Okay.
So the last section we added in because I've been watching this one like a dog in a bone. This was 100,000 we put in last year, $100 to replace the cafeteria tables and chairs. Chairs were replaced, tables didn't need to be, so there was some money left over of that. That the sergeant at arms asked if that money could be reallocated to go to reimburse them for the purchase and installation of the X-ray machine. This language was put in the BAA of the general fund.
Okay.
And he said, wait a minute, you're reallocating capital dollars. But it continued through all of the reiterations of the BAA.
Okay.
So it's still there in the general fund BAA that you voted on yesterday.
Yep.
I asked to have this put in, it deals with capital dollars. I asked to have this put in our capital bill in case this BAA gets vetoed by the government, and then we totally lose it. So it's here as backup.
Good idea.
If the BAA goes into effect and is not vetoed by the governor, this language is taken care of and be deleted from here. But I wanted it here as backup.
Thank you.
So that's the capital bill. We moved a lot of money around between two bienniums. Capital bills. We moved a lot of money around. For that. Okay, I don't think I missed, did I miss anything?
Yeah.
My court committee's half asleep.
I just would recommend that you buy a cushion for this bad wood.
But we are frugal.
No, I'm not that.
That's not a capital expense, it's allowed.
We took.
And the cash is all gone. So we can't do it.
Well, thank you. This has been very helpful. Thank you for coming over.
Anytime, I'll send you a note.
Every,
Yeah,
oh,
really.
you had backup.
Oh, I'm fine, I'll send you a note. I should show you
I'm
that.
glad you didn't. Yes, you
I
should.
should.
Yes.
I'm so glad halfway through reading it, he said to me, Madam Chair, you know what?
Yeah, thank goodness.
Sorry, it was. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Okay. Enjoy your Friday.
We will. And we have the other folks. Are the other folks here?
No.
Are they on? Did they not? Maybe they didn't. Did you communicate with them? I mean, yeah.
But
Well, maybe they saw that we were busy at 2.
Yeah.
Well, let's have Senator Plunkett just, or maybe I talk to folks. You know what, let's adjourn for now.
Okay.
Okay, we are adjourned.